You talk about third wave anti-racism as
Hmm.
a religion secular religion that is overtaking the conversation more broadly right now and is dictating how people interact. And this is not just in terms of the conversations that are taking place on campuses, but more broadly in our kind of cultural milieu. Um, Tell us a little bit about what your argument is and why are you calling it a religion?
I'm calling it a religion because I honestly believe that it is one. It's not a rhetorical feint when I say it's a religion. I don't mean like a religion. I literally feel the way a Roman would have watching this weird sect of people who became what we call Christians emerging. And some of them may have thought a religion is emerging among us. I feel like within my lifetime, I saw a new one come, and it was this elect religion. It's people who are under the sway of a way of thinking that requires that you subscribe to certain tenets, even if empirical fact doesn't actually correspond to them to an extent. And the parallels between the way a certain kind of person, and I don't just mean the left, I'm not talking about the woke left. Roughly, I'm talking about people on the woke left who are comfortable being really mean. It's a certain fringe of the woke left. Those people have a way of looking at things that parallels fundamentalist Christianity to a degree that you almost couldn't write better. And my issue is not that it's happening on college campuses. That's a very 2016 discussion. This is now just everywhere. It's at the point where, especially educated people, are under an impression that they might need to subscribe to this religion. They might need to take in these tenets in order to be good people. It's a very easy impression to fall under given the messages that are being put out there by especially the chattering classes, as it used to be called. And so I'm really worried about this. And the reason I'm worried about it is not just because it isn't pretty to see people not making sense. If that's all it was, then, well, there you go. The elect religion hurts Black people. It leaves Black people in the lurch. It evidences a lack of genuine concern for the actual fate of Black people, all in the name of something very narrow, which is showing that you're not racist. With the elect, it isn't about showing that you have faith in God. It's showing that you're not racist. So if you're showing that you're not racist, you're doing the right thing. But the problem is that very often this showing is something different from actually helping people of the race in question. And so this is something that came out of me by accident once, and I'm going to use it because it's a nice way of putting it. We've gone from this Martin Luther King to just Martin Luther. It's really just about showing your faith, except this time it's about showing that you're not a racist. And so just very quickly, here in New York City, you have to take a certain test. It's a rather brutal test to get into the very top competitive public schools. If you don't do well on the test, you don't get in. For the past generation, only then, there have been very low numbers of Black students getting in. Black students used to get in decent numbers, but we all live in our time, and so that's being forgotten. But nowadays, the Black kids who apply, the Black ones who apply tend not to do well enough on the test to get into a school like Stuyvesant. For many people, the idea is we must show that we're not racist by saying that we're going to just get rid of the test. If the Black kids aren't doing well on it, there's something racist about the test because it's all about results. If the result doesn't go well for Black kids, there's something wrong with the test. It's all about the results. Everybody knows that right there doesn't make any sense, but you're supposed to just hold back and be anti-empirical. This is what I mean about having the faith. And so you say, get rid of the test. And that means that you have a school where Black kids are not taught how to take that test. And they're going to run into tests like that in the very near future and not be as good at them as they could be because they weren't getting the practice that they would have gotten in learning to take them to get into schools like Stuyvesant. Not to mention that the whole caliber of the school will change if that test has nothing to do with the kids that get in. Now, if you mention, Black kids used to take that test and get in back in the 90s, and a lot of the change here has to do with the elimination of gifted programs. Well, people kind of look at you, just like you might say, how would somebody actually walk on water? Because wouldn't it break the surface tension if Jesus had tried to? And people would say, yes, but you're not supposed to delve. Same way with things like this. So the elect hurts Black people in many ways. There's a whole list of these things in one chapter in the book. And it worries me because I think that we're tending to forget what being an anti-racist is supposed to be.
Right. So your argument then is that anti-racism and the rhetoric of anti-racism is actually being used to infantilize and to undermine the dignity of Black people. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this reminds me of my experience back in South Africa when I was teaching over there at a university, and this is quite a while ago. This is over a decade ago, and there was this conversation about having more Black students in at the university, and there was an economic history program that they were thinking about introducing. But the way the program was being conceived of, it was supposed to be done without any kind of quantitative skills. And the idea was that, no, this is going to be a different program, and we're going to have graduates who will graduate without quantitative skills because, Black students are not, that's a very imperialist way of thinking, or a white way of thinking about knowledge and economic history, which I found terribly troubling, thinking these are students who are going to go out, be economic historians, or and not be able to speak to some of the skills that they'll be required to speak to. So it's interesting to me that this is the kind of conversation that has happened over a decade ago, and we've seen the kind of dead end that it leads to in other parts of the world. Yet in the US, we are having that conversation just now. It's almost as if we are in a silo and we're not looking across to any other place to learn how to have these conversations. Any thoughts on that, about the discourse of racism and anti-racism in the United States and how completely detached it seems to be from the global context?
Well, we definitely tend to look inward in this great sized and in many ways great nation. And we are not terribly inclined to learn lessons from other places. It's interesting. Thomas Sowell, the conservative Black economist and God, is somebody who wrote a whole book about affirmative action around the world. It's not even long. You can curl up with it and take care of it in about 3 sessions. And it really explains how the affirmative action programs that we're taught to think of as just morality incarnate have gone in various places over the 20th century, and the things that we need to be careful about. That book has had very little influence, and even if it were assigned to many people in positions of power about these sorts of issues, I get the feeling it would be largely ignored in favor of prescriptions by other people who are fashionable to listen to today. And yeah, one of the strangest things that we're getting, especially lately, is this gruesome recapitulation of the idea that it's alien to Black people to be precise and exact in thinking. These various calls that STEM needs to be changed to be made more welcoming to Black people. And, what else is that supposed to mean than that the hard math and the very close reasoning that are necessary to qualifying in the field is going to change? What exactly would the Black close reasoning and heavy math be? By process of elimination, you know that what it means is that we're supposed to allow Black people in to do things that are more spiritual, more impressionistic, and frankly, easier. And of course, the retort is supposed to be, how do you decide what's easier? And if you're going to compare the math that's involved in doing physics to sitting around talking about your impressions, I'm not even going to pretend that one of those things is not harder than the other. And yet, you have white people sitting and nodding as people sit and talk about, you've got to open this field up to us. Everybody just says that's okay. Somebody I'm not going to name, and I'm really not going to name, has a very, very widely read book out where this person actually writes with a straight face that we should eliminate standardized testing because Black kids often have a problem on them, and that instead we should evaluate students on, for example, their desire to know. What the hell does that mean? Their desire to know. First, how would you measure it? And let's face it, you might very much want to know about trigonometry and find yourself handicapped by not being very good at it and needing help. That could happen to anybody. Desire to know. And yet, this person is never asked real questions by anybody in a position of influence. And on top of that, When this person is asked real questions by some people who dare to do it, then this person waves the questions away as probably signifying racism. The reason being that this person hasn't been minted in an environment where they would have picked up that to be a public person taken seriously is to be able to answer sometimes challenging questions and not take personal offense. And it's not this person's fault because they've been minted in a climate where it's considered okay for a large institution to treat a certain segment of brown-skinned students as if they were not as intelligent as others and to let it pass. And so you don't foster people's intelligence and their abilities. All of this is like something out of 1873. So much of it sounds like don't teach your slave to read, or Black people can only come so far. A lot of the people who think they're being quote unquote anti-racist are being neo-racist in a way, out of their sense that a Black person's job is to be soulful and intuitive. We just feel it. We've got a rhythm. We have mammies. We have a history. We came over on a ship. We're subalterns looking at everything from down below with a special message of prophecy. And all of that might be true, but it has nothing to do with physics. It has nothing to do with reasoning closely about the complexities of history. You're never going to be a good biologist working from intuitions of those kinds. And yet, to say so is to be a heterodox person. That should change.